Oh my God, we're all going to die because the level of CO2 is now rising from 3 parts per million to upwards of 4 parts per million. Oh my God, we're all going to die. No, 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 we're not going to die. The plants love CO2. You all know this by now. The plants love CO2. It's a trace gas. It doesn't trap heat. It traps us a little bit of heat. You really don't care. No, you don't. Because you're trying to push emotional buttons. That's the purpose of disinformation. It's psychological blackmail, emotional blackmail. It's psychological warfare. You're trying to push emotional buttons. Of course, a few people will sit back and logically see what you're doing. You don't care because the vast majority are hoodwinked. And that's what you want to do. This lie was called global cooling. It was found out. And before that, it was the population bomb. It was found out. Everybody looked around and looked, whoa, overpopulated. It's not overpopulated where I live. I got all this open space and all this forest and all this desert. And when I look at the globe, it's mostly ocean. If we really needed space to live, we could float, a houseboat, or we could build piers extending out to the ocean in protected places, where the storms wouldn't wash it away so bad. But we've got land out the wazoo on this planet, and you know what? All the people on the Earth today, in the year 2008, could all fit inside a box less than 1 mile cubed. You could put every human being in a box on this planet, sit that box anywhere you wanted to on the face of this planet, and zoom out from space and look back. You couldn't see that box. It's so small. All the people on the planet would fit inside a box that's too small to be seen from space, too small to be seen from the space station, because it would be about, I think it's 8/10 of a kilometer. I forgot. I don't do numbers well. But it's less than a mile squared. I believe it's 8/10 of a kilometer. And that's like a half mile squared. 1/2 mile by 1/2 mile by 1/2 mile. You can't see something that small from space. All the people on this planet would fit in that box. If you stood everybody shoulder to shoulder and back to back on the planet in a small field, well, they'd all fit inside a field that was like 22 miles by 22 miles. You couldn't hardly see that from the space station. It's so small. So all these hoaxes get found out eventually, just like the 9/11 hoax. It alarmed a few people for a while. It confused a few people for a while. Some people were drawn into some weird cults, weird political movements, which are sort of like religions, really, because of the disinfo that was put out. That's what my video is all about. I'm trying to point out a huge, elaborate, organized, in-place disinfo network from the Cold War era, which is a misnomer if you understand it, because we're still in the Cold War, because these guys did not give up. These guys did not give up. They really did want to overpower the United States and the West, Great Britain. They really did want to whoop us, and they couldn't, and they're pissed because we really set them back hard. And it was really thanks to Ronald Reagan, who frankly did it thanks to his Alzheimer's disease, I think, because Reagan didn't know that his space weapons would not work, or else he was smart enough not to care, because he also understood propaganda and disinformation. He knew that we could outspend the Soviets in the arms race. If we made a bigger and better mousetrap, they would try to match it and overcome it, and eventually they would cave in and collapse, because our economy was stronger, much, much stronger than the economy of the Soviet Union. I'm trying to explain all this, but most people don't want to hear a lot of boring explanations, but a few of you do. And this is for you. This is your lucky day. But this is a disinformation campaign. It's simply to point out that when you're trying to attack an enemy, you can do a lot of confusion. You can really disrupt an enemy with lies, with false leads. In war, you attack from the right, but you pretend to attack from the left. Same as basketball. It's competition. You use stealth. You use, human beings, day in and day out, at almost every level of society, use psychological warfare, in a sense, on almost everybody, because most people are looking out for themselves and they're trying to gain the upper hand. You could call it selfish. Nature doesn't care. Mother Nature doesn't even comprehend a concept like selfishness, because Mother Nature, quote, designed us to survive. And people who are more clever and who outcompete tend to survive, and you end up with a lot of people who are very crafty. Oh man, I got a perfect example of craftiness. I was walking in the woods one day, and I saw a hawk on the ground in the woods. A hawk on the ground in the woods, and it was flopping. It had one wing outstretched, and I thought, oh golly, this hawk has been injured. And so I crept closer, of course, to observe this hawk that was making strange sounds, walking on the ground, flopping, with one wing outstretched. And I walked closer, and it kind of moved away from me slightly, and I walked a little bit closer. I was intrigued. And then eventually it just composed itself and casually flew up into the sky and disappeared. And I realized it was using stealth. It was using psychological warfare. It was using subversion. It was pretending to be injured to draw me away from its nest, which it did. So this type of thing allows a creature to survive and compete. It's natural selection. We humans do the same thing. Why should we care that one group beats out another group? Well, the only reason we should care is if we're a member of the group that wins or loses. And in this case, the United States and the West in general is being attacked by an enemy, by a competitor who intends to overwhelm us, overcome us, and overthrow us. No big deal. This happens all the time. Looking back in history, it's happened again and again and again. It's no big deal unless you're a member of the group that's being overthrown. And that's the position that I'm in. I don't like to just fall over backwards every time some competitor shoves his way into my territory. But I guess a lot of people do, because they are fooled by it, just as the hawk fooled me.